Today we have a super, super exciting guest here today. But and personally, because first off, he has a great title, obviously, of president and CEO of Playhouse Square. With two titles, do you get two paychecks?
Well, I'm not quite sure when I'm president and when I'm CEO. I don't know whether to merge, but anyway, I love having two titles.
Absolutely. You know, it looks good on a business card, but
yeah.
but also an ultimate vibes guy. We have Craig Hassall here. So excited to have you. And not only a good vibes guy, but I think what plays into the vibes, obviously attitude, but also the amazing accent.
I gotta say, you know, with this accent, everything I say sounds intelligent.
It does.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, you could BS your way through life just with that accent,
you know
especially here in America, because because you're a pretty well-traveled guy, you know, living in Australia, living in London. Have you lived in other places?
Well, I have a place in France as well.
And
well,
I mean,
that's
congratulations on all your success. But you're much more like worldly traveled than I. Is it just Americans that are just enamored by accents? Anyone who comes in with an accent, especially like British or Australian, you have them both.
I have a bit of both.
And people just like lose their mind. Is that like that with other places around the world?
I should say it is not like other places. Actually, it's not. It's unique to here.
Yeah.
The British actually kind of resent accents because they have so many of their own. You see, if you're a Geordie or you're Scottish or Welsh, whereas the Americans, they just devour accents. I mean, you love it.
Wild.
It's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
I went to the West Side
Good for
markets.
you.
I went to the markets to buy some olives, and I said to the lady at the olive counter, I said, "Look, may I have some wasabi olives and some pitted Kalamata olives?" And she said, "Excuse me?" I said, "Oh, may I have some wasabi?" She said, "Honey, I heard you the first time. I just wanted to hear you say it again."
That also has to be annoying.
No. I honestly don't mind.
That's great. Well, we sat down together about, I guess it was a year ago at this point.
Wasn't it? Yes.
We both were chatting before this. We forgot really what we were interviewing about. You know, when you do so many interviews, when I did so many interviews, you know, they become white noise. But what I do remember was ultimate vibes guy, Craig Hassall, you know, coming over here, which is great. But too, you've made such a good impression in Cleveland, being here for a year and a half.
A year and a half, I think.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, it was
came in February
of last year. That's right. In the winter.
So I'm nosy. I like to poke around a little bit, and you know, everyone I talk to about you or whatever it is, you get brought up in a conversation. Everyone's like, "Oh, love Craig Hassall, love him. He's the best. He has this, he has that." And the thing is that there's not even like he's great. But you know, not to pump your ego too much, but you know, what was your kind of mindset coming into Cleveland? I feel like I need to take first impression lessons from you, and everyone can. Is there a different mindset with that?
I'll tell you this. There are two things that I'd say immediately. The first is I had no preconceptions. I didn't know anything about Cleveland, so I didn't come here thinking, "Oh, there's that fire on the lake or whatever it was," and all these stories here. I had no clue at all. So I came in and took Cleveland on face value. That's the first thing. But the second thing is I wasn't coming here to rescue Playhouse Square. You know, I was arriving at a successful, thriving organization with great sales and great staff and great trustees. So, you know, it was a dream landing, if you like. So yeah, it's been wonderful.
That has to be really nice of coming into a place. So I'm not from here. I grew up in Rockford, Illinois, and moved here almost 7 years ago now. But when I moved here, I had a little bit of an idea of what Cleveland was, and you know, I feel like the national narrative is not great. And I had people telling me like, "Oh, don't move there. The river catches on fire quite frequently." And I'm like, "Holy crap!" And then they're like, "Well, the Browns are really bad." I was like, "Well, I knew that," but but then like the national narrative, it's wild of like people still were like, so I thought I was going to come into an inferno, like like everything is on fire, you know. I was like, wow, this is wild.
It's so far. I mean, this is bizarre, but I've now had 25 different visitors from either Australia or London or the US to meet me here. None had been here before. All of them said, "Why did I not know about this place?" And it's amazing, and I'm coming back.
Sure.
So So on face value, this is a great city.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've worked in some incredibly prestigious places, you know, in London, in Australia. I mean, Sydney Opera House. I mean, it's unbelievable. Of like,
nice building.
Yeah, it's a pretty sweet building. What was your initial reaction to getting the call? You were living and working in London, and from what I heard, you got a call from a friend who got an opportunity at Playhouse Square, and then they called you and said, "Hey, there's this place in Cleveland looking for a new leader."
Kind of. It was actually actually a headhunter who is now a friend.
Sure.
Tori, who's wonderful. She's with Russell Reynolds out of Atlanta. And she rang. I didn't know her, but she rang and said, hey, would you take a call? Blah, blah, of course. And she said, now, Craig, I have an opportunity for you. It's in Cleveland, Ohio. Don't hang up. Just hear me out.
Had you heard of Cleveland at that point?
I'd heard of Cleveland. I hadn't heard of Playhouse Square.
Sure.
And to be honest, I was thinking, I did say to her, first of all, I said, Tori, I'm very flattered and blah, 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 but I'm not going to leave London's Royal Albert Hall to move to a place in the is it Midwest?
We're Midwest. We're East Midwest.
Yeah, I wasn't really sure where you were. And I said, but I'm very flattered and thank you for the call. And then I thought about it some more. I thought, what the hell? Why not? Pandemic's over. London was a bit gloomy. There's a big world out there. I thought, I'll check it out.
Shocker, you went from gloom to gloom in most places.
No. Hey, look at today.
I know, it's beautiful.
I mean, it's beautiful.
But this is also the best time to be in Cleveland. Like, in my opinion, September, October, the best.
But I was going to tell you, everyone, Clevelanders always say, oh, the weather here, I'm so sorry, the weather's so terrible, the winters are so cold, the lake freezes over, blah, blah, blah. It's been beautiful. Even the winters have been beautiful.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and I'm saying this as someone coming from London.
Sure.
When I moved to London from Australia, Australia is the weather's spectacular. And a friend in London said, now, Craig, the way to deal with the weather here is you have to accept the default color is grey. Sometimes it's sunny, sometimes it rains, but it's generally just grey. So I came from that environment to Cleveland. So actually, this is spectacular.
I did a spring break wildly in Edinburgh, Scotland, in March. And
how much did you drink?
A lot. Yeah, a lot. And I just happened to be over there during it was St. Patrick's Day.
Oh yeah.
And it just was like, wow, this worked out really, really well. But the entire time, I think the first day we got there was a little bit of sun, and then the rest of it was gray and mist. And I remember being like, if I wasn't drinking this whole time, I'd be really, really depressed.
No wonder the Scots are so gloomy. And the accent.
Speaking of the accent, that is a wild accent.
It's wild. I after living in London for 20 odd years, I still found it very hard to understand what they were saying.
Yeah.
Oh, you'd go to a show and it might be a comedian and I'd lose half of it, honestly.
I got out of the airplane and not really thinking about a Scottish accent at all, and then I asked, because we didn't know where we were going, so I asked one of the janitors, and where are you going? And not intending to be rude, but I started laughing because I couldn't. I was like, this sounds like a I thought he was messing with me. It sounded like a cartoon. It was unbelievable. But with a resume, you got a heck of a resume. Sure. Where did this passion for theater for you begin, and the arts?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, I'd say I'm a huge advocate for education.
Sure.
And one thing I've learned here in Cleveland is education is high on the agenda, and there's a lot happening and a lot to do. So I went to school in Sydney, and I remember two fantastic teachers who went out of their way to take us, young, stupid kids to theatre and opera and symphony and ballet and all these things. So I gained a real love for the performing arts from just two teachers' passion that wasn't on the syllabus. And they made a point of taking us to all these things. And so I just thought, this is a fun kind of world. I want to work in this world in some way. Ideally on stage, of course.
Sure.
But that wasn't going to happen. I'm not good enough. So I thought, I believe in the fourth wall, as they call it. I'll work somewhere behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So I just pursued a career in some performing discipline. I'd started off in opera. I had no clue about opera at all. I learned a lot about opera. And then I ended up working in theatre and dance and all sorts of things. So, yeah, it was education. It was school. So a passionate couple of teachers.
That's amazing. And you hear these stories all the time with teachers, what you're talking about is, and teachers are amazing. All of them are great. My mom was an educator for 35 years, a principal, an elementary school teacher, but there is such a difference of like a teacher who is doing their job, and then there's one that just goes above and beyond, totally. And it's just they're in a different stratosphere, and they can send ripple effects through your life.
Absolutely. I just did actually last year Leadership Cleveland, which is this amazing course here in Cleveland with 60 colleagues. And we spent a whole day on education, looking at tertiary sector and primary and kindergarten. And my takeout from that day was child literacy is the most important thing. It's more important than social housing or employment, because if you can't read as a child, you're kind of screwed, you know?
Yeah.
If you can't read by 6, you'll never pick that up again. So literacy in children is so important.
Yeah. Absolutely. And there's so many different ripple effects. Obviously, not being able to read, but then also there plays into confidence and how you self-worth.
And
that
prospects and support. I mean, everything comes from literacy.
Sure. You brought up Cleveland. It's Leadership Cleveland. Is it a wild experience to not only come into a new country to live, but also a new city to live, take a job that is a prestigious job here in Cleveland, and automatically become a leader of the community? Is there like, and obviously well deserved, but is there added pressure on that, or are you just kind of just going with it?
I don't understand the question. That's fine. No. No, it was completely, I was diving completely into this abyss thinking, oh my goodness, what am I doing? But, you know, in my head I was thinking, well, I just came here by myself, so if this is a terrible idea, I'll just go back to London. You know? What the hell?
Sure.
But it wasn't a terrible idea. It was a great idea. And, you know, what made it easier for me is I was made to feel so welcome by the people at Playhouse Square and by the people of Cleveland.
Yeah.
And doing Leadership Cleveland also meant I was introduced to an entire network of people across not-for-profit, banking, manufacturing, education. So I was thrown into Cleveland life immediately, so that was incredibly helpful.
Yeah, well, you talk about Cleveland life. What's something that surprised you about Cleveland when you first moved here that you had no idea otherwise?
It's so livable. You know, I've got a house in Edgewater, and the metro parks are nearby. The lake, the underutilized lake, is so close. I was really surprised by just how easy it was to live here. I mean, I don't know if you've been to London, but London's a beautiful city. It's really busy, though. It's crowded. There's a lot of things to do, but a lot of people doing them. So Cleveland, you know, and I didn't really drive in London. Now, of course, everyone drives here.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to drive here because your motorways are empty. There's no traffic here.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. How were your driving skills moving over here?
Well, okay, here's the thing. So in England, we drive, like in Australia, on the left-hand side of the road.
Yeah.
And our steering wheel is on the right-hand side of the car.
Yeah.
So that's fine. But I have this house in France, so I drive from London to my place in the continent, and you then have to drive on the right-hand side of the road. But you're driving on the right-hand side of the road in a car with the steering wheel on the right-hand side of the car. So you imagine trying to overtake a car when the steering wheel's on the other side to what you're used to. So when I came here, I was like, oh man, that's so much easier because the wheel's over this side on the left. So yeah, it's a breeze.
Well, look at you go. Yeah, we finally got something right.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
That's great. So kind of going back to the origins of your career, I was looking and I thought it was ironic that you got your start in the arts kind of through sport with the Olympics, right? And also too, that was a beautiful Olympics. I think that was the one that, you know, I think I was 8 at the time, and it was the one that really sticks out in my mind of being like, my God, that's amazing.
That was wonderful.
How did you get involved with that, and how it brought you into the Sydney Opera House?
Sure. So, well, there's a bit of a link to the United States here. So I was actually working for the opera company at the time, and my boss had left to go and run a broadcast studio, and he was then on the board of the organizing committee for the Sydney Olympics. So he was doing that, and the guy who was running the cultural program went to Atlanta in '96, I think it was, and looked at the cultural program, came back and resigned. Thought, oh man, this is what a
I'm out.
I'm out. I'm done. I've had enough. So this job was available to run the cultural program for the Sydney Olympics, and it really had this reputation of being this complete poison chalice. And it was like, don't touch it. It's terrible. It's too big. It's too hard, and so on. But my old boss, who was now at the Olympics, said, "Hey, Craig, why don't you give this a go?" I thought, yeah, why not?
Yeah.
So I took it on, and honestly, I was very young, and I didn't know what I was doing, and neither did. And I hired people that I really trusted, and we all had not much clue what we were doing because there was no blueprint. And when you win the Olympic Games, you don't get a manual or a handbook.
Sure.
You just get lots of rules and regulations about what you can and can't do. And the IOC, who they control the license for the whole thing, are incredibly fastidious, but they're not that knowledgeable, if that makes sense. So they say you must abide by these standards and this brand portfolio, but it's up to you how you do it.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay. So I just leapt in.
Can you give me at least kind of a guideline? Put me in the right direction of focus.
Yeah, and the stakes are really high because for Sydney, it was the new millennium, it was the year 2000. So Sydney, it's a relatively young country in terms of European folk. And we had to kind of show the world a view of what Sydney was at the dawn of a new millennium. So that was a little bit nail-biting.
Yeah.
But we thought, well, no one else has done this before, and no one else can do it better or worse than us, so we'll just crack on and do it. And we did, and it was a great success. I think partly because, again, I don't know if you know Bill Bryson, he's an American commentator. He's a fantastic writer.
Sure.
And he wrote a story in the Sydney Morning Herald about the Olympic Games. He said, you Australians, you're so funny. You put yourselves down all the time, and you're so kind of, so we're doing the Olympic Games, I hope it's going to be okay. He said, whereas we Americans, we'd say, we're doing the Games, it's going to be the greatest, it's going to be the best, and you're going to love it. And if it's not at that level, you think, well, it wasn't so good. Whereas we Australians, we set our sights so low that it can only be a success.
Well, where do you think that mindset comes from?
The British.
Being a penal colony.
Exactly. I apologize to my British friends.
That's hilarious.
That's so true.
But it isn't. The older I've gotten, when I'm like 8, 9, 10, whatever it is, I look at like 23-year-olds and I'm like, they are adults. And now that I'm 32, and I'm like, and especially someone who's 32, which I am now, being like, they are mega adults. They have everything figured out.
So true.
And then now looking back at it, when I was 23, I was like, I was an idiot. And then also now it's just like still trying to figure out. But I feel like I've even talked to my dad. He's in his almost 70s. He's like, we're still just trying to figure it out.
Yeah,
and
of course.
but that is something in life. It's like you're never going to be ready for the opportunity, but it's just how you handle taking the opportunity. But yeah, to touch on that a little bit of like just being like, I had no idea what I was doing, but like, how did you push through that?
So the first thing was hire great people. My part of the Games was putting on all of the concerts and celebrations and various events and all the exhibitions and so on. So it was an arts-related portfolio. So the first thing to do was hire great tech people from the arts and great marketing people, great programming people. So I had a team of about, initially 30, but it grew to about... it grew to about 3,000 actually.
Oh my God!
But that wasn't everyone.
Hell of a growth.
and they all left in one day. Trust folk that you bring on board. And because there was no blueprint, we had quite a lot of freedom to sort of curate and shape the cultural program. So we had a board that we bounced things off, and we'd have to go to the IOC in Switzerland once a year and present our plan for the next year. So we had sort of...
How were those meetings like?
Terrifying.
I'm sure.
First of all, they're in French.
Yeah.
And,
already, stage one, terrifying.
Terrifying. So you could choose to deliver the thing in French or English, and my French is pretty sketchy, so I would do it in English. And
my French is 0, so you're above me.
So you probably also do it in English.
Yeah.
So you're giving this rather complicated presentation with Gantt charts and deliverables and budget and so on, and you've got headphones on like we're wearing now, and someone is simultaneously translating what you're saying into French, and then when you're speaking, and you have terrible imposter syndrome, thinking, "What am I doing?"
Yeah.
And as you're speaking, what you think is a rather insubstantial, ill-formed plan of attack, some poor bastard is translating this. And you think, oh my goodness, it doesn't even sound that convincing in English. What must it sound like in French? I can't imagine.
Yeah.
So it was rather terrifying. But then, after a couple of those, you think, well, I've got this. It's fine.
Sure.
Yeah.
And how many times did you have to present?
It was about twice a year for 4 years.
Yikes.
Yikes. I know, right?
My gosh. So was there ever a time there when they were like, absolutely not, with an idea?
Yeah, actually, there was one. It was quite tricky situation. There's a company called Cloudgate, and they're called Cloudgate Dance Theatre of Taiwan.
Okay.
It's a Taiwanese dance company. They're brilliant. And we were bringing them to the final festival in the year 2000. Now, the chair of the IOC Cultural Commission was a Chinese guy called Monsieur He. And, China doesn't recognize Taiwan. It's a whole political thing.
Yeah.
And so when I presented the program, they came back and said, well, fine, but you have to present this company as Cloudgate, the dance theatre of the People's Republic of Taipei. And we
Interesting.
said, but that's not what they're called.
Yeah.
Well, what do we do? And of course, the company said, well, we're not going to come if you call us that. We won't. That's not our name.
Yeah.
So it became bigger than me. So I ended up having to pass it on to our sort of government affairs people, and say, hey, this is beyond my pay grade. This is potentially an incident. So can you help me out? And happily, they went to the federal government and said, what's our position on Taiwan? And they're like, well, we recognize Taiwan. So the government had my back and said, no, you just keep on. So we
It's
did
good
it.
to have the government have your back.
You want the government to have your back.
Yeah.
In most countries, you do it.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's a really good point.
This one too, you know. Yeah.
Interesting. So then that brings you to Sydney Opera House.
Well, kind of. So I was actually working for the opera before I went to work on the Olympic Games.
Sure.
And I was working for Opera Australia, which is not the building; it's the company that makes the shows. So we would make all the operas, and so I was based at Sydney Opera House. So, but I didn't run the building, thank goodness, because it's a beautiful building. But
there's a lot of pressure there.
A lot of pressure. Well, also it's difficult. I mean, I won't go into it. So after the Olympic Games, I actually went to work for Sydney Theatre Company, which is it's the national theatre company based in Sydney. And then I went to London to the ballet, and then I came back to run the opera company, which is even more time at Sydney Opera House. We also performed in Melbourne and toured around the country. So, yeah, for some reason, opera sort of followed me my whole career. And I do now love opera, but, you know, as a young kid, I wouldn't. Did you go to the opera as a kid?
No. Hell no.
No, exactly.
You could probably. Actually, I did enjoy theater as a kid.
Yeah.
I but it had to be like my brand of theater. Like Lion King. I saw that. I'm like, this is the best thing I've ever seen. Jersey Boys, things like that. Like if you're giving me something that's like full dialogue or also like a grandiose musical, it's not quite on brand.
Yeah, we had an expression called opera whiplash, where you're watching a 4-hour opera and you kind of nod off and you snap back.
Yeah.
That's opera whiplash.
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
No,
that doesn't sound fun to me.
No,
yeah.
well, that's why Playhouse Square. I mean, so fantastic having the Broadway season, the Key Bank series. It's just we have Broadway, and people love it, and I love music theater. So
sure,
yeah, it's fantastic.
So you're at Royal. We'll fast forward a little bit at Royal Albert Hall, but then you hear about Cleveland, and you know what was it about Playhouse Square specifically, and maybe now having to look back on it, you know, what were the things that were just like super intriguing about leaving your life in London, coming across the pond to something that you really didn't know much about? You know, what a leap of faith.
Yeah, I know. Well, actually, as I said, it was made very ezy for me because of the way I was treated when I arrived here.
Sure.
I've always said the two things.
Did they pick you up in a limo or a town car? Or did you have to Uber?
No, actually, you know what? It was two of my team came to the airport.
That's so nice.
So that is better than any town car.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. I always said the two things that compelled me were, first of all, the theatres. And you know the theatres. They are so beautiful. The fact that they are immaculate, massive, 100 years old. It's phenomenal.
They're beautiful.
They are beautiful. And I don't really think Clevelanders really appreciate how unique and massive they are in the sort of ecosystem. They're phenomenal. But trust me, they are out of this world. So it was seeing those.
So coming from here, one of the first things I learned was that Cleveland has the second biggest theater district to New York, and I was like, what do you want me to do with this information? Number one, but number two.
That's right. And
that's great.
Yeah.
But then number two, I grew up going to theater in Chicago, but then also I've been to Broadway. I was so underwhelmed when I saw the Broadway theater, so I just kind of assumed that I thought that they were going to be Playhouse Squares.
Oh, I know. We're so spoiled here, and I mean, I love Broadway. Broadway is
absolutely
it's sensational, but we are spoiled here with the theater. So that was the first thing. The second thing was honestly the attitude of the trustees. It's what I call glass half full. Everything I threw at them, their view was, that sounds amazing. I think we should try and do it. And if we need to raise money, we'll raise money. Let's crack on with it.
Yeah,
and
it's your accent. Yeah,
it's the accent. It's the accent. Let's knock them all down. Okay, fine. That's a great idea, Craig. Yeah.
Yeah. But from what I've heard of, from people who know you, is that you kind of look at. I was talking to Shakori Davis about this.
Oh, yeah.
He said,
I love that guy.
Isn't he the best?
He's the best.
He's phenomenal. What a great story he has. It's
amazing.
unbelievable. But he said that a lot of people think right here and they have a ceiling and this is kind of what you can do. And I feel like you kind of get that being in a organization for a very long time of being like, well, I've tried that, this and that. Here's the protocol, yada yada yada. But you came in and had no ceiling, so like kind of sky was the limit.
Well, I think also you have to have no ego, and you can't be precious about ideas. And I learned that from a guy I worked for in London called Raymond Gubbe. And Raymond is still a great friend, and he was a promoter of classical commercial concerts. Now, classical music is not for everyone, and so if you're going to make a buck out of that and do it commercially, you have to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And Raymond had 1,000 ideas, and we'd cost them up and so on. And if it didn't stack up financially, he would just lose it. He wouldn't be remotely attached to the idea. So nope, it's gone, throw it out.
Yeah.
And I've learned that you have to have lots of ideas.
That's hard though.
It's hard because they become your babies.
Yeah.
Like, no, in the river.
Yeah.
That's right. No, if they don't work, and that's good. You have 20 ideas, and also I don't mind. I have had a few times at Playhouse Square where I said, "Hey, why don't we do blah?" And they go, "Yeah, that's a terrible idea."
Give me an example.
Well, happily none spring to mind, but no. But and also, so if I was a terrible megalomaniac, I would say, "No, we are doing that, and damn the torpedoes, and just do it." Well, that's not actually a successful way to do business, is it?
Yeah. I'm not comparing us by any stretch of the imagination, but I think
you can do that.
Sure, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So we're the same. But I need, like when you're bowling, and you have the guards that come up. I'm the guy who just like throws it as hard as I possibly can. I'm like, let's just see what happens.
Yours bounces down the aisle.
Yeah, but I have people in my life that are the people that keep me in check. That's definitely my wife, where she's just like, great idea. How are we going to do that? Like,
how are we going to afford it?
Yeah.
How are we going to do it? Yeah, yeah. Exactly.
I'm just caffeinated and I'm ready to go. Like, I got big ideas,
Exactly.
you know? Absolutely.
Exactly.
So one thing too about Playhouse Square where you can have a lot of big ideas is because of the organization structure that they have there as well. It is essentially, it's a foundation and an organization that is unique, correct, to a lot of other.
Completely unique. I mean, unique in this country, unique in the world. In fact, I was talking to a fellow yesterday about other districts around the world, and we're looking at Hong Kong, we're looking at Sydney, we're looking at Fisherman's Wharf for San Francisco, and we're trying to explain and compare cultural districts. And I explained the structure of Playhouse Square, and this guy was saying, this is too good to be true. The portfolio you have, all these theaters that you own, the shows that you control, the resident companies that you house in your patch, the buildings that you own, the fact you have a hotel, an apartment building, and commercial real estate, and you manage real estate, all of that makes for a very sound business portfolio.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I can't think of another institution that has that, honestly, anywhere in the world.
I mean, it's unbelievable what. When I learned this, it's you guys essentially own 1 million square feet of real estate.
I think it's even more.
And now even more.
I think it's more.
Yeah.
It keeps going up, and that's not, well, that is sort of my fault, but...
You keep buying buildings, man.
I know, right?
But one of the intriguing parts about that is, of one thing that really made headlines is the Greyhound station.
Yeah.
I mean, and that is, I'm sure there was another thing where you guys were able to get it, and they're like, all right, what do we do with this?
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
But again, I would say with the Greyhound, it wasn't that I came in and saw the Greyhound and said, hey, I think we should buy that building. That's been in the sights of the trustees for decades.
Yeah.
Tom Adler, who's one of our trustees, is a fantastic fellow. He was like, yeah, we should have bought that. It was really good. They've got to buy that building, buy that building, buy the building. And again, you know, as I say, I came in here to a successful organization. And, you know, Art Falco spent many years acquiring buildings. And Art, he's a very humble guy. He would never blow his own trumpet about it. But the guy was a genius in terms of acquiring real estate in a neighborhood strategically and in such a clever way. And Art's always of the view, you know, Playhouse Square was kind of the purchaser of last resort. Like, we didn't go out there seeking to buy a hotel or all these things, but it just happened that way, and it was really good in hindsight. So,
and at the time, was it to kind of stabilize that neighborhood?
Yeah, totally, totally.
Yeah.
Because it's securing the asset. You know, the golden goose, if you like, is the Broadway, the KeyBank Broadway series, and our season ticket holders and our resident companies. And so, it's having control of the neighborhood is really important, and the Greyhound adds to that as well. So, what are we going to do with that? I don't know yet. I have an idea. I have some ideas.
Give me a loose idea.
Well, roughly, I mean, it's probably, without leading the witness, it's probably going to be a place where you might go and, I don't know, hear someone perform or see a show. I don't know.
Get the hell out.
Imagine that. And there might be a bar or two, maybe you get a bite to eat. But actually, importantly, what it will be is it'll be a place where you can, what I call, graze. So rather than go to a 7:30 show or a 2 p.m. matinee or whatever, you might pop in and you'll hear a bit of someone doing something, singing or performing. You might have a drink, you might have a bite to eat, you might meet some friends. So it's adding to the offer in the neighborhood. And the more we can do that, the better for turning Playhouse Square from a collection of theaters into a destination.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the end game. If we get to that point, then we've succeeded. And the Greyhound's going to be a really important part of that.
And outside of the Greyhound station, how can you do that? And what is kind of some of the loose plans of doing it? Because, you're right. There are so many. I go to Playhouse Square maybe more than a lot of people my age, and I probably go 4 times a year. And I only go there for a theater. But also probably my favorite time at Playhouse Square was when you guys had the marquee opening last year. That was unbelievable. But how important is it to make, because there really is an opportunity to make Playhouse Square the kind of cultural epicenter of Northeast Ohio.
Yeah, totally. And now there's a few things to say. First of all, you need to have a lot of things on offer so that if someone like you comes down to Playhouse Square and you're not going to see a show, there's enough to interest you. So we have the plaza opposite the Chandelier, which we're going to hopefully increase the size of next year to make it about a third bigger again. And if we do that, our plan is to program that every weekend with jazz, comedians, dance, food festivals, all sorts, even through the winter months. And again, I think Cleveland say, but it's so cold in the winter. It's like, well, it's cold in Berlin too, but they manage it. So
right? Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the coolest outdoor kind of winter things is the one in Chicago, and now it's escaped me, but it's right outside of Wrigley Field, and people go there, and it's like this little cute little thing where you get all bundled up.
Actually, when I was working in London with Raymond Gubbe, the promoter, there's an idea I had. Kew Gardens is like the botanical gardens of London. It's massive gardens and so on. And in the winter, it's closed because it's dark and cold. And I thought, hang on a sec, we do a lot of Christmas concerts at the Royal Albert Hall and all of these things. There must be a way to activate this park in the winter. So we commissioned 7 lighting designers to do amazing lighting treatments of all the areas of Kew Gardens. We opened it up, we sold tickets, and we had mulled wine and chestnuts and all these things. And I think we needed to sell about 80,000 tickets in the first year to make our profit, and we sold about 560,000. I mean, it was a huge success.
Oh my gosh!
And that was in the middle of winter. It was dark and cold, but there were activations. So you can activate a place all through the year if you do it cleverly. So back to your point, if there are other reasons to come down to Playhouse Square, you will come down.
And hopefully this isn't a long time, but by the time you retire, your time is done at Playhouse Square. What do you ultimately want it to look like? What do you want it to feel? What do you want it to be?
That's a great question.
Thank you.
You should do it for a living. I think for me, success would look like getting Playhouse Square and thereby Cleveland. And I say not just Playhouse Square because we're not an island. I work really closely with Greg at the Rock Hall and the Art Museum and the Orchestra and Metro Park. So I want the offer to be that Cleveland becomes like Nashville or Detroit or New Orleans or maybe Vegas, or not so much Vegas.
Without the high property tax.
Exactly.
Or prices.
But a place where you think, probably domestically, but maybe internationally, hey, we should go for a long weekend to that place. I've heard Cleveland, there's always something on. Let's go to Cleveland. So turn the dial up so Cleveland becomes a choice set offer for that mini break, that weekend, that family holiday. And, all the assets are pretty much here. We need to join them up and promote Cleveland in that way, I would say.
So you're even looking outside of Playhouse Square. You're looking not only regionally.
Yeah, totally. Well, just join the board of Destination Cleveland. That's a great outfit. Those guys do a brilliant job.
They're phenomenal.
They're phenomenal.
Unbelievable what they've been able to achieve.
Oh yeah. So we're helping them now bid for the Special Olympics in 2030.
Yeah.
And and that's David Gilbert putting that bid together. He's done a brilliant job. And if we get that event, that's huge for Cleveland. And they had a conference just now of a conference for conference organizers. Now, that potentially is worth billions of dollars for Cleveland, and that's Destination Cleveland going out there and selling Cleveland to people that are organizing conferences. It's unbelievable. I know.
An organization for organizing.
For organizers, yeah. I know, it does your head in. Yeah.
So do you guys? There's so many great institutions here of like Destination Cleveland, Rock Hall, Playhouse Square,
Greater Cleveland Partnership, as well.
Metro Parks.
Yeah.
Do you guys have like a Godfather meeting of the families meeting? Of like getting together and obviously probably playing a little bit nicer, but
I won't answer that.
the first rule about the Godfather meeting is that there is no Godfather meeting.
Exactly. We don't formally, but I see those guys all the time around town. And another observation coming here, which I found incredibly refreshing, is I don't feel for a moment that we Playhouse Square are competing with the Rock Hall,
sure,
or University Circle or the Metro Parks. That there's so much on offer, and there's enough to go around in terms of audiences, eyeballs, interest. So the more we can promote each other, the better. So for the Rock Hall inductions, for example, we're doing a whole marquee takeover of the marquees to promote the induction. And why not?
Why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you? It's a huge Cleveland story. That induction ceremony, it again puts Cleveland on the map all around the world.
Yeah.
So we have to support the Rock Hall in that. So it's a good environment to be working in.
Sure. I mean, it's the rising tides raise all ships.
Absolutely. It's certainly true. And I'd also say, just a plug for the mayor, Mayor Bibb and Chris Renane, the county executive, are also on the same page. They share aspirations. They're both enthusiastic and positive and moving in the same direction. And that helps all of us hugely, sort of follow in their wake.
Sure.
I went to a talk the other day and Mayor Bibb was there, and he's a terrific guy. He's so young and he's so ambitious, and he's got a good mind, and all his talk about sorting out the lakefront and the airport and all these things, I thought, this is brilliant.
Yeah.
That's right, and we'll all follow you 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how much you follow football, but speaking of the lakefront, what's your opinion of the Browns leaving? If they leave.
The Browns are leaving?
Oh. If they
Did you say the Browns are losing?
Well, they are losing. That's not ideal.
You know what I love about the Browns? And I know absolutely nothing about football. I'm going this afternoon or this evening to I think it's high school football. Have you heard of Paul Revere and the Minutemen or something?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, is that a thing? Yeah. I'm going to see them play.
Amazing.
I honestly don't know anything about it. Just a quick story. So there's a fellow, a New Yorker who I know, who was working for me at the Royal Albert Hall, and he brought me a Browns cap. So I'd had the job, and he was in London. He brought me a Browns cap. We went to watch the Dolphins play the Saints from New Orleans.
Sure.
Yeah. At Tottenham Stadium in London.
Yeah.
And I'm wearing my Browns cap, and this guy's walking up the aisle with about 8 beers, and walks past and he just says, "Go the Browns." I said, "Excuse me?"
Did you forget you were wearing the hat?
No, I forgot I was wearing the hat. Anyway, the Browns, I don't really have a view. I think the only equivalent I could say is in Sydney when we did the Olympic Games, the Olympic Stadium, which was 140,000 seats, and it was cut down to 80,000 after the Games, and it was the home of Australian rules, which is that's a big sport, back in Australia.
Sure.
And there's the same conversation about, oh no, it's terrible for the downtown and we'll lose and so on and so on. It didn't at all. It value added.
Sure.
Having this big stadium in the west of Sydney, it was about 20 minutes from the downtown, and there were a few hotels and things there, but the ceremonial heart of a city is always going to be its downtown.
Absolutely.
So whether the Browns is there or not, I think the downtown will be absolutely fine.
Have you been to a game yet?
Of course I have.
Heck yeah.
They won. I've been once and they won. It was the opening game of
Did you sit in the dog pound?
I did not sit in the dog pound. I'm not even totally sure what that means.
It's like the bleachers kind of at the
So
end.
actually, someone suggested that we name one of the bars at the Greyhound the Dog Pound. Wouldn't that be good?
It's a perfect sports bar.
Perfect sports bar. It's probably never going to happen, but it's a good idea.
It's a good idea, not on brand, but
Not on brand,
a great
but
idea.
a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, from what all you've done, continuing to not only, with your resume and also here in Cleveland, continuing to push culture, Playhouse Square, the city, the region, what drives you, to continue to do this, and what are you thinking about every day?
Sure. I mean, I've worked in different art forms, and they tend to be what people call, and I hate this term, the high arts, ballet, opera, and so on and so on.
Sounds hoity-toity.
It sounds hoity-toity, and it's a real turn-off. And what drives me is making what we do accessible to as many people as humanly possible.
That's so cool.
Because what we do is so great. We do at Playhouse Square, we have 8 resident companies, and what they do is phenomenal, and the Broadway season is phenomenal. And I would hate anyone to think, well, that's not for me. So we have this huge education program, and that program is primarily designed to introduce young kids who would never in their wildest dreams come to Playhouse Square to come to Playhouse Square. And if we get that right...
And how are you guys doing that?
Well, so KeyBank helped fund it, which is good, and other donors and so on, with a lot of support from the community. Because for a young kid from an underserved neighborhood to come on a bus to Playhouse Square, someone has to pay for the bus. Yeah. Someone has to buy their lunch. Someone has to look after them, chaperone the kids, help the teachers. So a lot of money is required to provide that experience for these young kids. So we are really grateful to so many donors and corporate supporters like KeyBank that actually make it possible. And that's the key. Just remove all the barriers that you can, and also target these young people that would not ordinarily think about coming to Playhouse Square. And I've done that same in London, same in Sydney.
And what a potential game changer it could be for their life, their outlook, everything.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I went to a posh boys' school, but even then, if I didn't have these teachers showing me this world, I'd be probably a football fan. I don't know. I have no idea. And I think if we can open young people's eyes to the magic of theatre and dance and concerts and get rid of the hoity-toity, then we've done a great job.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Cool. What are we doing at Playhouse Square in the now that people can now experience? Like, what can people expect, coming up this fall? To put in perspective, we're recording this on October 4th. So what can we expect, in the next month, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months? Well,
the great thing is there's always something on. We have 12 or 14 venues, so there's always a show. So off the top of my head, we opened tonight, this may be too late by the time this goes out, a ballet called Strictly Gershwin that I commissioned for London many years ago. Sure. And it's a whole ballet celebrating George Gershwin's music. Fantastic, but it's only on till the weekends, only Friday and Sunday. But then next week we open the KeyBank Broadway series with Neil Diamond, Beautiful Noise.
Let's go.
You're probably too young, but people my age.
I got one Neil Diamond song in my repertoire, Sweet Caroline, baby.
Well, that's the finale. Yeah. So that's coming up, and the KeyBank Broadway series starts. And what I love about this series is all the shows. David Green and I, who does a lot of programming, we get to see in New York in advance, and David essentially will curate the season. He makes sure that the mixture of shows is so random, well, seemingly random. And in a season, you have a show like Shucked, which is my personal favorite.
Okay.
It's a musical about corn.
Oh, shocking. So I went to the University of Iowa.
Oh, it's set in Iowa.
Let's go.
It's about corn growers in Iowa.
Do you have Manford Man on? Because I am getting blinded by the light over here, so I'm moving over a little bit. But yeah.
So in the season, you have Shucked, which is the most hysterical comedy. I mean, it's just wonderful. It's hard to give you the narrative of what it's about, but go and see Shucked. And the same season, we have Parade, which is heartbreaking, a true story about a young Jewish accountant in the South who was wrongly tried for murder and then murdered by being lynched by a mob. And that's a true story.
Jeez.
Now, that is a full-on, it's brilliant. I'm getting goosebumps now telling you about it.
Yeah.
It's an incredibly impactful, brilliant show. I saw on Broadway, we're all in tears. So to have those shows like that in the same season, and then there's Life of Pi, which is a play about this young kid.
It's about pie.
It's about
apple pie.
It's not about pie. It's about a tiger. It's a tiger on a boat.
They made a movie about that, right?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
It's got incredible. It's like Lion King puppets. It's all these amazing puppets of giraffes and rhinoceroses and tigers and so on. And again, it's a fairly full-on play. A very challenging ending. But goodness me, you leave there like open mouth. So. There's so much coming up. And then the resident companies, right now Pride and Prejudice is on, Dracula is on at the moment with the ballet. City Club do forums every Friday, which are phenomenal. We're so lucky to have all these resident companies doing all the things they do. I'm seeing Into the Woods in about a week. That's Great Lakes are doing Into the Woods, and Midsummer Night's Dream. They're doing a double bill of two shows set in the forest. There you go. Shakespeare and Sondheim. Why not?
I love it. If no one had any idea about Playhouse Square, an alien came from outer space or whatever, how would you describe Playhouse Square?
Are you talking about me?
Yes, I am. Yeah, I was masking it a little bit.
How would you describe Playhouse Square? You'd have to talk in some way about the theatres. Mm-hmm. You'd have to reference it with the context of it in the kind of Broadway ecosystem around the country, because it is actually the most important Broadway market outside Broadway.
Sure.
Because of the size of the theatres and the length of the season and the number of season ticket holders, so you'd probably reference that. I'd want to also give it a context in the city, and it's a little bit like the art museum or the library, that these edifices that were built 100 years ago when Cleveland was, I think, the 5th largest city in the country.
Yeah.
So, you know,
6th, I think.
6th.
Fifth?
Sorry, I didn't mean to exaggerate.
How dare you?
How dare you? And so, 100 years on, you have these almost like photocopies of a grand city which is still thriving. I mean, the library here is one of the best in the country.
Yeah.
Amazing. So I'd want to say...
I've never been in it, but I've heard.
Oh, you've got it. You have to go in it.
I'm a big audiobook guy.
Oh, no. Here's a quick fun fact about the library. The library was built just in the wake of the Great Fire of Chicago.
Yes.
Yeah. So you go in there and just... There's not a trade secret. Walk in there and tap the wooden architraves around the door, these big old oak door surrounds.
Sure.
They're all metal. They're metal, painted to look like wood.
Interesting.
Because when that building was built, the city of Cleveland City Hall said, you cannot use wood in construction in the wake of the Chicago fire.
Yeah.
So they built that building with stone and metal. So everywhere you see it looks wood, it's all metal. There's
Wild.
a fun fact.
That is a fun fact.
I'm not even from here, and I tell you this stuff.
Look at you. Well, I'm not from here either. I do have a few years on you in Cleveland, but that is a fun fact. Look at you go.
Yeah.
All right, quick hitters, and then we'll rock and roll. This has been so much fun, by the way. I knew it was going to be fun.
I love an audience. I just talk for hours.
An audience of a camera. Look at us go. All right, favorite all-time theater production play?
Don't ask me that.
I just did.
Okay, fine.
Is it Shucked? Give us a. Which one are you really into right now besides Shucked?
Well, I'd probably say Into the Woods, actually.
Okay.
Great Lakes are about to do it. And I just think Into the Woods is
This is a good Playhouse Square plug.
Good Playhouse Square plug. But I would have said that even if it wasn't coming. I mean, Into the Woods is probably one of the cleverest musicals I've ever read, seen, and so on and so on. Musically, it's fantastic. It's a great story. Ends well. It's very witty. So probably Into the Woods.
Maybe this is a more interesting question. What is the most underrated show?
Oh, okay. Well, this is weird because this is also a Great Lakes show. I'm not on commission, but, go Great Lakes Theatre.
You're not on commission, you're just on the salary.
I know. This is amazing. But what sprang to mind was a musical I saw at Great Lakes. It had been on Broadway, and it flopped on Broadway with Josh Groban. It's called Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812.
Okay.
So it's based on War and Peace.
Yeah.
So I'm not selling it to you. I can tell by the look on your face. But
I'm ready to roll.
it is the quirkiest, amazing musical, and it just... I don't know how it did here in Cleveland, but it didn't do very well on Broadway. It's done very occasionally. It's really, really good, and it's completely underrated, I would say. There we are.
Well, let's go together.
Let's go together.
Absolutely. That sounds amazing. All right, let's get outside the theater. Your favorite Cleveland restaurant or, best thing you've eaten here?
Oh, gosh. Well, I'd probably say my favorite Cleveland restaurant is probably Amba in Hingetown.
Okay.
The Doug Katz restaurant.
Yeah.
It's Indian food because Doug grew up next to an Indian family, and often his parents are away, so the neighbors would look after him when he was a kid. Apparently.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and so he grew to love Indian food. The food's fantastic. It's very dark. They're all dressed like you. They're all dressed in black, and so the only thing is you walk in, you can't see. So
you can just see smiles.
You see smiles. Yeah, when the staff smiles. But the food is out of this world. So that's probably my favorite, I'd say. Yeah.
What is something that surprised you, either about culturally wise, about Cleveland? They're like, I didn't know anyone did this, or about America, or something that surprised you that was a little bit of a culture shock.
Oh, so many things. So many things. I find the supermarkets overwhelming.
Too many options?
Too many options. They're so big. In Britain, you just say, well, if you want carrots, they're there. Here there's well, what do you want? What color carrots? They come in colors.
They also come in different sizes.
Yeah, exactly.
We've gone as far as having carrot chips, which is a wild move.
Is that
Baby carrots,
Gosh, okay. Here's two things that surprised me. The first is at Thanksgiving where you have the pie that's made from pumpkins.
Yeah. Pumpkin pie.
Pumpkin pie, of course. Yeah. Pumpkin pie.
How did we come up with that?
Yeah, who would do that? That surprised me. I had my first bite and thought, that's my last bite of pumpkin. I did not care for that pie at all.
You gotta load it up with Cool Whip.
Yeah, or just maybe eat something else. And the other thing is, fruit. Because I make my own muesli in the morning, and I always ladle it with blueberries and strawberries and grapes and various things. Your fruit, I don't know what you do to it. It lasts forever, and I mean forever. I might go away for 2 weeks, come back. Those blueberries are as crisp and juicy as when I bought them.
Probably pesticides.
I feel that deep down.
Wash your fruit.
Yeah. I know it's something bad, but I kind of love it, so I don't want to know too much about it.
It's convenience.
It's convenience.
Yeah. That's just eating in America. Just be like, well, this is probably horrible for me, but it's convenient, so whatever.
Exactly, yeah.
What's something that you really miss about that you can't get in the States that you had in London?
Tea.
Yeah.
And I'm not
Does
talking,
the tea suck here?
I'm not talking iced tea. I'm talking about a proper cup of tea, whether you take a teapot, and you boil the water, and you have tea which is not in a bag, it's actually loose in a tin, and you put it in the thing, and you boil it, and you let it steep. Steep means rest.
Yeah.
And then you pour it into a cup, and it's hot. It's not iced with lemon. I miss tea.
It sounds diabolical. It sounds so inefficient.
Actually, I brought from Australia, there's something called Vegemite. I don't know if you've heard of this stuff.
No.
Yeah, right here. I took it into the gym because I was talking about it with the guys in there, and we had a Vegemite tasting. So Vegemite is a black, salty, dense spread in a jar that you smear on toast, and you have it as a child for your entire life in Australia.
Black.
It's black. It's made
dense.
from. It's an after product of making yeast or something. I mean, it just sounds horrible.
Yeah. It's probably one of those things where you had to be there.
You had to be there. And my taste test of like 5 guys in the gym, I had one fan. The rest are like, no way, this is worse than pumpkin pie.
Yeah. I love it. So, not a pumpkin pie guy. Loves a black spread of yeast on toast.
I'm going to bring it on toast or on a baguette.
Or just eat it raw.
You can eat it raw. It's quite strong. I might bring you some. Yeah.
Please. I'd love to try it. All right. We have basically gone an hour.
Oh, no way.
Time flies when you're having fun with friends.
Doing the introductions.
We're getting there. We're getting there. Any questions for me? What do you got?
Oh, gosh. What's your favorite place to go in Cleveland?
Oh, my God. Well,
where I've not been.
So I live in Tremont.
I love Tremont. I love the Fat Cats.
Fat Cats. I went there. I was there this week.
Oh, brilliant. You're near West Side Market. It's my favorite place.
Lovely. I love West Side Market. I would say
Velvet Tango Room.
Velvet Tango Room is phenomenal. So yeah, go on. What are my favorite places in Cleveland? Yeah, keep going.
Sorry.
This is great.
I'm leading the witness. You tell me, Austin.
So I love. Well, I'm at Market Garden a lot. Love me some Market Garden. And this is also too of like convenience because I love staying in the Tremont area. Yeah. Like my wife and I love just being in the neighborhood and like going to all these different places. I love the new steak, which is phenomenal.
Oh, I've heard about it. Not been to it.
It's really good.
Yes.
It's like a fun kind of atmosphere as well. I mean, we're at Southside. There was one time I went to Southside 4 times that week. So what's Southside is right next door in Tremont.
Oh, I've not been there yet.
Yeah, it's good. It's really good.
Yeah,
Yep. So, but my favorite like fine dining, Il Venetian. Have you been to Il Venetian?
I've been to Il Venetian.
It's so good.
It's really good.
Yeah.
It's really good. And actually, it feels genuinely Italian as well.
Absolutely.
The pasta and stuff, it's great.
Yeah. Phenomenal. All right. Are you on social media? How can people connect with you?
I am, I think my name is just Craig Hassall.
Yeah. How many jokes do you get about your last name?
So many.
From 2 guys with interesting last names that are just teed up for people.
Oh, I know. I let them go through to the keeper, as they say. Yeah. That's a cricket reference for those of you who, Yeah.
I didn't get that one. But this has been so much fun. So just Craig Hassall, Hassall.
Well, we say HASSALL. They'll go, what? Excuse me, what?
We're not that smart here. Yeah. Our brains do not work on that level.
I'm just at Craig, HASSALL. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bam. And LinkedIn.
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm a terrible LinkedIn correspondent. If you ask me to be a LinkedIn buddy, I'll probably consider it in about 3 years. So
cool.
don't be offended.
All right. So don't bank on that one.
But go playhousesquare.org. That's the one. I mean, go there, and all these random shows I mentioned, you'll find them there.
Love it.
That's more interesting than following me.
Cool. Anything else you want to get off your chest?
Baseball. Can you tell me the rules just quickly?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Are you going to the game this weekend?
I am.
Let's go. I'll be there on Saturday.
I'll be there.
Let's go.
I had last time I was there, I had a beer with blueberries floating in it. What the hell is this?
It's the bumbleberry from Fatheads.
Well, yeah, I'm learning so much.
Yeah. So baseball, 9 innings.
Yes.
If you're at home.
Which is that's the square thing?
No, well, I'm just saying if the home. So
I'm sorry.
Yes. So much. But you are also right. The Guardians are at home, so they will pitch the first inning.
Yep.
And then the top half of the first inning. So each inning has a top half and a bottom half.
Got it.
And when you're at home, you pitch at the top.
Yep.
Which is an advantage because then at the 9th inning, if you're losing, you have the opportunity to hit and score in the 9th.
That's like
inning.
serving in tennis.
I don't know tennis, so the analogy is lost on me. Maybe the next podcast you can explain tennis to me. So you get a hit. If it's a single, you go to first base.
Yep.
And then there's 3 outs.
Yes.
You know that.
Not really, but yes.
So, and then the pitcher, when they're throwing to a batter, you get 2 strikes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, it's 3 strikes. 3 strikes and you're out. Yeah. It's from Damn Yankees. You probably know that. So 3 strikes, 2 to like stay alive, and then you get. If you get 4 balls, which are outside of the strike zone, that is a walk. So then you get to take a base.
Okay. I mean, I find it fascinating. I've been a few times.
Take my number, and then when you're at the game and you have any questions, just where are you sitting at?
I can't remember. I have no idea. But when I first came here, I would be invited quite often, and people would say, "Oh, I'm sorry it takes so long. It's like 2.5 hours." But it used to be longer because now they've done something to change around.
Yeah.
And I'd say, hey, don't worry. I come from the land where we have 3-day cricket tests.
That's really long.
Seriously?
We could never.
Yeah. Attention span. No.
Just let's get this thing rock and roll. So I like the new baseball rules. So they put a pitch clock into it. So it's like you get like 25 or 30 seconds because I mean, back in the day, like people would take forever between pitches, and you have the guy stepping out of the batter stepping out of the box.
Yeah.
And they could just do it all the time. I mean, like games would take forever. I like it, the short-term play on television, but when I'm there, I'm like, I don't want to complain, but I will. I want this to be like a half hour longer, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
The other thing is, and I'm used to watching cricket and tennis where you sit and you watch. That's why you're there. Here, you're drinking, you're chatting, you're eating.
Yeah.
I mean, you occasionally think, they're still playing.
Absolutely.
And the same with the basketball. It's so social, which I think is wonderful.
It's a very social event.
Yeah.
Which I love about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and again, Cleveland, you have 3 major league teams right in the downtown. That's fantastic.
Especially for a city that has a population of like 350,000 people. Like, it's unbelievable.
Amazing. Yeah. Go Cleveland. Yeah.
Let's go Cleveland. Go Playhouse Square. Go Craig Hassall. Craig, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. This was so much fun.
Cool.